time, I will explain what it actually means. Okay? So what's the benefit of attending this presentation until the end? That you will understand how you, with one eye information, or with how you can enhance stereopsy. Means how can you see solid 3D, solid VR. And you will also be able to understand what one eye information does to make something VR. Okay? Now, room scale VR. We make 3D. Okay. We make 3D. Can you close close the door? So because when you make VR, room scale VR, you basically are building like an architect. I'm standing in front of a projector. I'm going to do this. Okay. You want to be an architect because you're building room scale VR, 3D environments like in the world. But you want to create it nice so you can connect it to it. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that. So basically what I'm going to talk about is architectural presence. How can you, when you're in VR, are fully connected and understand the environment? When I talk to a lot of communities who are making VR and AR, the concept is they think that presence is something totally new, that is only exists with VR. No. The word presence exists already a long time. Even the Romans and the Greek and the Egyptians used it. The Greek, they called it genius loci. When you were in a building or saw a building from far or close, how come you see 3D and how come you're connected with that? And that's what we're going to explain through this. No, is something real or virtual? It doesn't matter. In this presentation, I will show a lot of real examples, not virtual. Why is that? Because from my eye, it doesn't matter. My eye is just a sensor input. It's the most extended part of our brain that are a sensor that brings it to our brain to make it 3D. Okay. Now, those two things, if they're fake or real, I don't know anymore. Which ones are fake or real? No. Anybody knows this building? Yeah, it's in Rome. It's a very famous building. Okay. Anyway, why has this an historical impact and so important? Okay. When you stand in the dome, you really feel that dome as 3D. It's really odd. You look at it, wow. And I encourage you to go to visit some buildings here in Mexico City where you're going to see that too. When you see this building, anybody knows it? Yeah. When you stand in front of it, you feel a connection. You're really going to say, wow, how come is that building is so perfectly projected on my eyes? We're going to talk about that. When we look at this building, from anybody knows it? Okay. It's built by Taruando. Taruando understand how you can, when you walk in there, how come you feel that shape, how you understand it. It's the same with VR. When you put your goggles on, how are you going to make sure that the person understands the space clearly without being trying to guess? Anybody knows this? Okay. It's early game design. I'm going to talk about that. How that relates to VR. Yeah? No, what we're going to talk about, what you want to understand is basically, is there a language of architecture? Are there elements in architecture that we can use in VR when we put our goggles on to really feel the 3D? A misconception is a lot of people say, well, it's anything I drag and drop in it and I put my goggles on, I have 3D because I have two eyes. And that's wrong. To understand that, we first have to understand how we see 3D. How come that when I look here, I feel and understand the depth of everything? And there's three parts to that. Part one is because I have two eyes. Think everybody, okay, Carl, I know that. But there's a few things very interesting about that. When you're born, you see upside down. We don't know yet when the procedure happens, when you start to flip it. We don't know. Is it before you were born or just after you're born? No, our eyes, and that's interesting, are 540 million years old. We're not going to change the behavior how we see. That's why in VR there's certain things you should not do because it doesn't work. Another thing is there's not one animal or human being with the eyes upside like this, vertical. We're all horizontal. Okay. Now, I can only focus on humans because animals we don't know actually how they see. We call it depth perception. They have depth sensation. We have depth perception. We see 3D because we have our left eye and the right eye. Very simple. Two different images. They're about 6 centimeters difference, and in our brain they make it 3D. Now it's very strange because my eyes cannot see this image and I cannot see that image. They can only see combined in the brain. Now our eyes are still flexible, that behavior. Although it's 550 million years old. But if I put glasses on who see upside down, I very fast adjust to it. Very fast I will be able to grab and understand the space, be able to drive. Of course, I don't recommend you doing today and driving around with that in Mexico City. Okay? No, you can see that in some games. Hey, this is from okay. When you look forward, you look forward. But when you rotate 45 degrees, you actually rotate it in the game 90 degrees. You don't get sick because very fast you get adjusted to it. Okay, there are certain things you should not do. Is, for instance, show a different image on your left eye than your right eye. Totally different. Like I show Mexico City and here I show Cancun. You're gonna get sick. You agree? No, in Unity there's an API that you can actually say, show on the left eye something totally different than the right eye. We were wondering, who will use that? How can he be so stupid? And we got a request multiple times. And we said, no, you should not do that. You're going to get really sick. No, I really need it for, and there's only 2 reasons we found why. Anybody knows? Why would he show something totally different on the left eye than the right eye? It's really simple. I didn't know too. No? Because you do a sniper game or you do a pirate game. What's that? Of what? Yeah, but but in VR when you show fully 2 other ones, you have to watch out. Yeah, you have to watch out. You're gonna very get sick. But Google Glass could be another thing. No, here it becomes interesting. Part 2. Why do we see and understand also depth? It's because we have one eye. Strange. When I close my eye, one eye, I still understand the depth. I can still punch you straight in the face. Or maybe not. Okay. I understand the depth. And that is something very unique. Okay. There are things that we're born with and things we're not born with. It's something unique in our human being that when we're born, automatically I can grab objects. I understand this is a separate object from the background. There's something you're born with. Okay. But there's things you're not born with. Okay. This is a nice example done, the Gibson walk test. It's a little baby who has to walk over a glass palette. Over here that glass and understand the depth. It is no proof that the moment we can move as a kid, that we understand depth, and automatically little kids will not walk over the glass plate. Ah, okay, wow, nice. Somebody who's professional, okay? Okay, so you will not walk over the glass plate, okay? And that we know already. But when you're born, there's things you have to learn. Okay? Like things, for instance, understanding the depth, how far an object is. When you're born, how long does it take that you have very good depth perception? That you understand that object is 5 meters away. Anybody knows how long it takes? No, we're going to come to that. But how long? Does it take 1 week, a year, 10 years to understand how far an object is? It takes about 13 years to have a very good depth perception. Yeah, 13 years. Because if you look at little kids who are playing football, the ball hits their head because they're still learning. And you are learning too. Which rocket is closer? Well, it's actually this one is actually closer. And it's 40,000 kilometers closer to us. So, you're still learning. No. because you know certain objects, or you know the gradient of it, you know this is a fake picture. If you would never seen rock or never understand this object, you would not know it's fake. Okay. Now, how do we see 3D and understand space with one eye? There's a lot of elements to that. Okay. When I see an object, a picture like this is one eye information. There's no difference between left or one or two. It's just a flat image we see here. Okay? Yes? Okay. Now, there's certain things that I start to see 3D. One is, hey, because I know the object, we call it a familiar size. I know the stop sign, and right away when I see it so far, it's so much percent projected on my eye, that means it's so far. And that's why when I hear people, when they say, I'm going to make a VR game, a total different new world that nobody's seen before, well, good luck. Because nobody understands how far, how deep it is, how can you connect with it? No, there's more elements to that. For instance, aerial perspective. That means object in the far lose color. And over time, you start to learn, the more color, that's how far an object is. That's why maybe in Unity make a shader to lose color the further it goes, because then you know it's far away. Also, texture gradient. We know the gradient of the flowers, the grass. We know that. So in VR, when you use textures, it's super important to use the correct scaling. I see sometimes people put in a patch of grass. Then my brain is, okay, this is grass, it's so far. Hold on a second, but the resolution is totally off. And then your brain is like, Then you get tired and you leave. So there's a lot of elements that we and we use it, like the Eiffel Tower. When we know that information, we can exaggerate it. Okay, the gradient texture, you lose color the higher you go. The Eiffel Tower, the painting, especially made the higher you go, the lighter the painting is. So it creates the illusion even, it's much higher. Yeah. In Unity, we're fully aware of that, and we try in our tutorials to place objects that we know the size, like the human being. And that helps us to understand the space. But if you don't have any information, you never know how far this object is. There's zero information. That's why I found the Unity tutorials not the greatest one for VR. Because there's not much information here, how far is this? But if you add objects to it, like, for instance here, a weapon or a hand, you understand much better the depth of this. Okay. But there's not enough clues here yet in this image to better understand it. Okay. There's more clues we use. One of those elements that we use is perspective. And this is something we learn, or in certain cultures that it doesn't have. It's what we call monocular cues, means one eye information hints to understand the space. What do you see? A cube. And it's because you're taught to see and learn perspective. But certain cultures will not see that as a cube. They will see it as a star. Because they didn't learn, and there was no necessity to understand perspective. If you live in the deep jungle, for instance, in dense jungle area, you will have a much harder time to build a perspective. No, look at this. When we look at an image like this, we use here the perspective to understand this space. But also, there's much more to our eyes. Relative size and absolute size. Absolute size. If you have the same object and you scale it, it's oddly enough, you see it as depth. There is no depth. But your brain, when an object is taken and scaled, it becomes depth. Relative size, if objects are, we know the size, and that's why here pictures like this make our brain confused. Because we normally that person is so far, but when it's like this, it confuses because there's not enough information. Okay, that's why again, pictures like this, we clearly understand the space. Look at this, what they do. Perspective, the further it goes, the lighter. They use the same object and then they scale it. And all that information builds up to understand that space. No. When you stand still and you have one eye, how many hints or cues do we use to understand the space? We have the aerial, we have gradient, we talked about relative size and absolute size. Well, there's actually 11 elements we use with one eye information to understand the space. And that's quite a bit. No. How many information points you have with two eyes? If you have two eyes, how much information does your two eyes use to understand the space? What do you think? How many points? 5? Point 1 is, as we talked, is stereopsy, is having two eyes, just 6 centimeters differences, left and right, gives us a 3D. There's another element to it that we have to understand space. It's called converse. When an object is close than 10 meters, my eyes overlap. Okay? The muscles pull our eyes, okay? And the nerve that sends the information to our muscles sends that information to our brain. And over time, you understand so much coming from the nerve means that object is that close. But there's problems with that. Because if an object is further than 10 meters, it doesn't work. So that means if an object is closer than 10 meters, we can understand the space because we have two eyes and we have the nerve information. When it's further than 10 meters, we only have one cue to understand the space. That's why you really need to use the information of one eye information for VR to really understand your space. Now, there's a third one, and we're going to talk later about that, a shadow stereopsy, because it doesn't exist in real life. So that means if you don't have enough cues, your brain makes up. And here's a nice example. What do you see? A lake or a wall? See? Your brain doesn't know, not enough information to make it up. It's actually a wall, you can see a little bit here and there, but it's so difficult because the moment you don't have enough cues, you make it up. You don't have enough one-eye information to understand. You think the person floats. That's why there's a third part that's super important. We have two eyes, we have one eye, and we have part 3. It's because we can move. The moment you can move, you're not going to have this problem. Okay? You're not going to have a problem like this. There's no little kid like, hey, because when you move, you're going to see that there's actually the face here it's from the kid. When you move, there's no guy riding like on her. It's her dress who's dark just there. No, there's no. But the moment you could move, you understand. And that's what we call motion parallax. In VR, if you can move or move the environment, you will better understand the space. Now, if you move, make sure you have objects in the back and the front that overlap each other. Because our eyes, objects in the back move slower than the front in that way. And that gives us so much information to understand the space. Okay, they understood that already a long time ago. Anybody been here? Okay, what did you do there? No. What did you do there? What's that? The praying happens here. What did you do there? Yeah, what?
Well, actually, it was designed so if you put it in the middle, you can see everywhere. If you go to one side or the other, the two columns would overlap and you wouldn't see two.
Okay, but you cannot still in the middle. Okay, so what do you do there? Everybody walks around, and there's a reason why. When they designed it, you have those pillars. You have 2 layers of pillars. When you walk, you see the parallaxing of those pillars. And that's how you understand the space. Now, if you would stand here, here, and here, you would have a perfect perspective of the columns overlapping. And you would very fast understand the space and say, okay, I'm out of here. The architect, Bernini, really placed those objects there, so you're going to walk around and see the parallaxing and start to see the space. It is the same in VR. If you can make a player walk, they will better understand the space. And that concept exists already from the Gothic time, where they make you walk through churches and understand the space. No. All that information we learned, how can we use that to build architectural presence? How can we use one-eye information to make it 3D? Okay. We're going to get a few examples. We're going to use perspective, relative size, and absolute size. Just 3 elements and build out something. Okay. the dome. You have typical buildings here also in Mexico where you have a beautiful dome, like the dome in the Pantheon. Okay, why do we really see 3D? Well, first, a quick question. What is the name of that opening? Oculus. It means the eye. It's not DK2 or Google Cardboard. Okay. One of the elements, even when we look at other domes, even when it's flat, a picture, or when it's a drawing, I start to see 3D. One of those elements that we use here is just that perspective lines. If I would construct it that there's no perspective line, like it's not making smaller, I would see more as flat. They especially did that, those lines, converting to create perspective, it creates on the eye, and it creates depth. No, using absolute size. Let's take this square here, okay? What do you see now? A square. Okay. The moment you start to put the same object in there and you scale it each time, you start to see depth. But hang on a second. It's flat, it's 2D, but you start to see depth. That's why in VR, if you can exaggerate that, you're going to see. That's why one-eye information helps you to understand 3D. But if you put light in there, then on top of that, it becomes really out, and you create way more depth than it is. But you understand the depth. It's like in animation. People exaggerate a little bit the animations to become alive. It's the same with VR. Now you can cheat on that. This one, so the absolute scaling, the percentage scaling is the same. What they sometimes do in buildings, they actually scale a little bit more, and that creates more depth. But that it's not deeper. It's just more scaled like this, and you think, oh, it's more 3D, but it's not. And we call it perspective distortion. No, perspective distortion. Anybody been there, stand in front? Okay. If you stand in front of here and you look at it, you see like perfect. Okay. Now if you look on the internet, what's going to happen, a lot of people say it's because of the golden ratio. Anybody heard of that? Guess what? Throw it in the book. Throw it in the garbage bin. Why? All over the internet, they say you have to use a golden ratio. It's in all buildings around the world. That's why even my body uses the golden ratio. The Mona Lisa is because of the compositions, and you see it all over. Now, if that's really true, then everybody will say right away, that's my favorite square or rectangle. They can't. Because guess what? There's no scientific proof. It's people who write up a story to make it beautiful, but nothing been proven. But when you stand in this front of the building, it is not even. There is no golden ratio, what they say. And I'm going to prove it to you why. Because the building is not even built a rectangle. The building is actually built like this. It's perspective distorted. It's a few centimeters of differences on the left and the right down. Because if you stand in front of it, your perspective lines bring it up, and then in the eye, you see a perfect square. Okay, now perspective distortion goes really far. Even the distance between the columns here is wider than the inner ones, because of perspective, it makes it perfect look. Okay. Even Steve Jobs understood that. This one versus this one is 1 millimeter longer. Because of my eye, it puts it a perfect cube. This was called the next cube. And that's why he did that. No. Shadow. We can actually prove that shadow has a super important scientific tool. And I'll come to that. Now, shading and light, all those things give us more information. And here we better understand the shapes because of the shadow. Even shadow can give us the illusion that things are there, or things that we cannot see, which thanks to shadow we understand it. We better understand the shape of this object because we don't even see the left side, but we can see it because of the shadow. That's why the shadow is, that opening they did here was really important because it creates a shadow in there and it creates that dome feeling. But let's see problems. Okay. Imagine you model this in VR and you look at it. And you're a little bit far away from the building. You start to see flat. This becomes flat. There is no much 3D anymore to it. And there's a problem because the problems are you have a convergent stereo opposite problem. That means the moment I go far away, my left eye and the right eye image is not much difference anymore. So I don't see much 3D anymore. Also, the problem is the converse. The moment it's more than 10 meters away, my senses are not giving information of depth anymore. But how come that when we look at Greek columns or the Romans, when we're far away, we understood and we understand they are 3D. Even Egyptians understood that. When you look at an Egyptian temple from 300 meters away, you still see the shape. You still feel as 3D with one eye because you're not relying much on your two eyes anymore. Because shadow. Those carvings were specially done because of the play of shadow. And this is the thought process that I know when I see those shadows from far, I understand as 3D. You don't need a normal map. That's why architects like Taruando, who have simple shapes but make it really good with the shadow, that you understand the space thanks to shadow. That's why in Unity we have light baking, global illumination, and all those objects. Okay. And here's a proof why shadow is so important for VR. Stereopsy does not exist in real life, but you can do it and prove it in VR. Okay. The left image and the right image are exactly the same. There is no stereopsy. There's no difference between the left eye and the right eye. We take the left eye and we put on the right eye. You're going to see that's flat because there's no 3D information. But the moment you move the shadow, you see the shadow is different. You're going to see as 3D. That means that shadow is so important to help you to see 3D. Okay. Now on movement, I talked. We use a pictorial monocular information. That means one eye information builds it up. Now, the moment I can move with one eye, whoa, more information. But there's a problem in VR. A lot of people get sick. You put it on, you move your joystick, and we have problems with the moment you stand still, you put the goggles on, and you move forward. The acceleration, you get sick. Walking, you get sick. Walking left and right, you get sick. Rotating makes us really sick. No. Let's give this. The basics about that is that if you're going to use this, the motions you use them as natural. Like if you don't walk super fast or super slow, walk as human beings walk. In VR, never touch the camera. What does that mean? The player is always controlling the camera. You never turn the camera or do a cutscene with the camera. Game design is totally different. You never can control the camera because if you, as game developer, rotate the camera in the game and the person is looking forward and automatically rotates, get sick. No. We also learned that acceleration, you get sick. But one thing I want to point out is this. Perceived acceleration. Okay. When a horse runs to a barn at the old ranch or in the Middle Ages to the castle, do you know why the horse automatically slows down? Even when there's nobody sitting on the horse. Okay, when you drive on some big highways, you have those white lines in front of you coming to an intersection. Why do you slow down? Okay, because when the horse runs to the barn, the distance between the trees planted towards the barn becomes closer and closer and closer. They especially do that. Because if the horse runs at a constant speed, what happens? The movement of the trees are faster and faster. So the horse perceives it's accelerating. In order to keep the constant speed, they think they slow down. And that's how they see the same movement of the trees. That's how they slow down. On a highway, we put those white lines, and the distance between those white lines become closer and closer and closer. So you automatically slow down. You can do the reverse effect in VR. When you accelerate the objects along the way, the distance is wider and wider, so you're never going to feel the acceleration. Look at, who has seen eagle flight? Okay, when you fly with the eagle through the buildings in Paris, have you done that or seen it? Who has seen the movies? One person? So it's a game where you're an eagle and you fly in Paris and then you dive down to go to the buildings and back up. The moment that the eagle goes dive down between the buildings, what happens is you get the information of those buildings moving fast, and you get sick. What they did is the moment you get faster, they make the sides on the left and the right side more darker. They make it like a vignette, so you don't see the fast-moving objects, so you don't get sick. So, but let's see at some examples that alternatives that we don't really move and rotate in VR without getting sick. No, one thing that we talk about is teleportation, though, I think. Everybody has heard about it? Hey, look, I'm standing here, and I go to there. Hey, you click, and you say there, okay, I go to there, and you click. No, here's a nice example of that. When you look at a certain area, and you click, come on. And you can control your rotation before you go over and go there. But there's one problem with this. The moment you can walk, you have the parallaxing and you understand the space. With this, you don't have it. No, here's another example of what you can do. What is talked about is when you look at a certain area, you click and you teleport super fast in 100 milliseconds. What happens there? Look here. You're going to look and you go there super fast. No, you're still going to build up 1, 2, 3 frames to understand the space with parallaxing. You're not going to get sick because your brain is not caught up in 100 milliseconds on your movement. And that helps you at least to understand the parallaxing and building up what we call hemius loci, the presence. But here's another example I really like. I'm going to play it to understand the space. Look, it's a mirror for teleportation. You look in it, but you see, when you move in the mirror, you're going to see the parallaxing of the other side. So, and you can grab that mirror, see, and now you walk into there, the other space. No, okay, you see the mirror, and you walk through that. So you still have a bit of parallaxing going on, and you know exactly where you want to go. Look, and then there's a nice example here. You can actually grab the mirror. Come on, baby, grab the mirror. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've seen it. Okay, now you see, you can grab the mirror, and you can look around. So you still have really understanding the space before you go to it. So there's all different ways to when you move around, and I really wanted you to think about it. Okay, pretty cool, eh? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. There are buildings, when you look at them, they have a magic feeling to it. You connected to it. Like, this is the Manchester Arts and Crafts College. But look at this. It's repetition also. They use all those elements you're going to find back to create that mythical form and connection with it. The falling water house. The light is important. Disney, concert hall. The shading creates that shape that you understand. Okay. Anybody knows this building? It's a church in Paris, in France. No, in Paris, in France. The shapes are from a girl. It's the thigh, the hip. Yeah, when the church found out, they didn't find it funny. So, lessons learned. If you do room scale VR, think how you can use one-eye information to really bring it out. Don't always think that the golden ratio was true. Maybe use perspective distortion to exaggerate it and to create the shapes that's perfect for the eye. They say that I use the golden ratio. For me, it's a pile of rocks. But okay. If you do VR, think about how you're going to move your player around. What can you use and trigger to really understand the space? And they don't stand in a certain space and just, okay, look at it. Because if they can move around, they better understand the VR. Really use shadow and shading and lighting. Because it's not proven that it really helps you understand the shape much better. Okay. No, my one point of advice to close this. It's really simple. When you test your VR game, put the goggles on and close one eye. If you can play it and understand with one eye, your two-eye information will bring it way more alive. But if you have to rely purely on two eyes to understand the space, then sometimes your eyes will have to make up information. Okay, Also be aware, on the end of this year of Unity, we will come out with a VR editor. That means you can put your goggles on it, you have your panel, and everything what you do in Unity, you can do it in VR. You will be able to say, click, create a cube, scale it, put a texture on it, and do even profiling in VR directly. Okay, I want to thank you for coming to this presentation. It was a bit crazy, but I hope you understand when you create VR, listen to technical advice, listen about game design. But my point is, use one-eye information to really bring it alive. Thank you.